changing the brushes on a Morris Minor DR2 windscreen wiper motor. So here's a windscreen wiper motor in your engine bay on the passenger side, left hand side of the car. And at the back here to get to the brushes are two flat-headed screws, which you need to undo and remove before you can remove the rear plate to give you access to the brushes. Now the brushes are two small carbon blocks which sit in saddles, which connect the live feed from the battery to the commutator arm, which makes this motor turn. And at the top here's another lead going in to the motor, which is the lead which accesses the stop start mechanism to the blades to make sure they stop and start at the right spot. But we're only going to change the brushes today, or check them and give them a clean, because we haven't looked at this windscreen wiper motor since we've owned the car, which is about 8 years. So it's about time we had a look at the brushes to see how worn they are, because once they get worn, the commutator arm then gets worn by the metal holders which hold the brushes in, wear it out, and the motor will stop. And the first sign of your brushes being worn is intermittent wiper motor working, and you need to stop, change the brushes. So I'm going to hand over to my wife, because this is fiddly with small bits and I'm hopeless with small stuff. So she's going to show you how you change the brushes.
Okay, so first things first, I've turned the battery off, and also I've put a piece of cardboard underneath the windscreen wiper motor so that if anything falls out, it's going to fall onto the cardboard instead of down into the engine bay or onto the floor, and I'll never find it again. So I'm going to undo these two screws here. They're flat bladed, so I undid them a little bit earlier because they can be a little bit stiff, and they've got really, really long bolts behind them. So you undo both of those, and also you've got these wires as well. So you've got a black with a green thread going through it at the bottom, and you've also got a green going through the next one up, and you've also got the earth going through the bolt at the top. So once you've undone all that, you sometimes need a little bit of leverage with a bit of a screwdriver, but you should then be able to take off the front. Okay, so I've gone in a bit closer. So what you've got here is you've got a commutator here, and then you've got these two little arms here, and they've both got little cups on the end of them which have got carbon brushes in. And what holds them in is the pressure of this spring, which you can just see in here. There, the spring there. So what happens over time is that the carbon brushes wear down, because what they're doing is the commutator is made of copper, and it's got little tiny copper sections on it, and it basically affects the polarity, because this is an electromagnetic process that makes the windscreen wiper motor run. So over time, the carbon brushes will wear down, and eventually you'll have no carbon, and you'll have the metal of those little arms rubbing against the copper. And if you leave it, it first of all won't work, but also you'll eventually damage the copper of the commutator. So to replace the brushes, it costs less than £10. Or a windscreen wiper motor, if you leave it and it gets damaged, it's going to be an awful lot more than that, at least £50 plus. So it's worth changing them to make sure they don't wear down. And I can see on this one that they're pretty worn. So I'm going to change the camera angle, and then I can show you how to change them. Okay, so I've changed the angle of the camera. So these are the little things here, and as I say, what holds them in is a spring between. So when you're looking at this, as well as looking at the arms themselves and the carbon, you also want to look at the little spring as well and make sure that it hasn't disintegrated. And you can actually see where all the copper is worn away inside. So this is getting quite worn, this one. Right. So our carbon on those is pretty much gone. Look, you can probably see that on there. So I'm going to ease the one out, and then I'm going to replace it with a new one. And the new ones look like this. So much, much bigger than the amount of carbon I've got in there. And you put them with the little lines facing the copper. Okay, so what I'm going to do, you can take them out in situ in the car, but you can also just take off these little pair and take them off at the same time. That's what I'm going to do. One, and then the other. and then you've got the pair there, and actually taking them off will normally be enough to release the little carbon things inside. So if not, you can just use a little screwdriver to ease out carbon brush. And you can see actually how flat that was. There we go. So I'm going to put the new carbon in. Okay, so before I put the brushes back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a bit of a clean. Now, what you're going to clean it with is electrical contact cleaner. You don't want anything else, and you don't want to use anything that's going to leave any bits and pieces or lint or anything inside here, because this is an electromagnetic process that runs the motor in here, so you don't want anything that interrupts that. So I'm going to get a bit of contact cleaner. I'm going to put it on my brush, and I have done this just beforehand because you don't want to see the whole process, but I'll just give it a bit of a cleaner in. And you're getting rid of all the copper dust and the carbon dust that gets rubbed off as part of the process of the two rubbing together. And it's much easier to do this with the brushes and the brush holder off. So I'm just going to do that first, and I'm also going to clean the lid as well. Okay, so before I put them back on, I'm just going to show you. So what happens quite often is when you take them off, they fall apart. So just to show you how they go together, in case that happens to you, there's two little pieces that hold the spring on either side, and they go in from the outside and into the middle, and then there's a spring which holds them together. So it's under tension, so I'm just going to put them on first. So I've put them in position, and there's a little tiny slot where they fit onto on either side, and then I'm going to put in the new brushes. So these brushes have got anti-slip grooves on them, which go against the commutator. So they're going to go on the outside. Okay, so there's one. Now I took the holder off in order to get the old ones out, but it is easier to put the holder back on before you put the new ones in. If you don't do that, you'll tend to find that it all falls off and you lose the brushes. So these are proper carbon brushes for this particular windscreen wiper motor, but it is possible to get other brushes, generic ones, and you can get quite large packs of them as well. And then if you do that, you can then sand them down to the size that you want. And there we go. So what I've now got to do is put everything back. And the first thing I'm going to put back is this piece here. So it goes underneath there, and it holds in the two pieces there like that. And then I'm going to get my newly cleaned cover, and I'm going to put it on, and this hole here goes on to the spike which is there. There we go. And then at that point you can then get the two very long bolts that go in. Now, not forgetting, of course, the earth lead which goes onto that. And I'm going to get my screwdriver. Do it up. And now I'll just do the bottom one up. So I tend to find that it's better to put the bolts in once you've got the lid in place. If you try and put the bolts in while you're putting the lid in place, you tend to find that you spend a lot of time trying to locate the lid, the bolts and the lid. Okay. So now the last two bits again, give them a bit of a clean. That lead, making sure they're all home. And there we go. Now, one last thing to say is that I've noticed, and you might have noticed it too, that the rubber stops that this is sat on are very worn. Now, if these are worn, it takes away from how effective the windscreen wiper motor is, because there's vibration going through and you lose some of the action that's happening there, really. So we will be replacing those. So that's another job that we need to do. But for tonight, I've done that job, which is great. So if you haven't done this for a little while, take 10 minutes over the next few days and open it up and have a look. Because if you change your brushes, it will cost very little. And if you don't, it could cost you a lot of money. And there you go.